So why do people commit crimes? And who really ends up paying the price for it? These are some big questions, and today we're going to dig into a theory that gives some pretty challenging answers. It's called left realism.
All right, let's just start with a really practical question. Think about it for a second. When it comes to everyday street crime, the stuff that really makes communities feel unsafe, who do you picture as the victim? Who suffers the most?
Well, the answer, at least according to left realists, might actually surprise you. It's not always the wealthiest people. In fact, they argue the main victims of crime are very often the most disadvantaged groups in our society. We're talking about the working class, ethnic minorities, and women. And this single idea, this is the foundation for the entire theory.
Okay, so with that in mind, let's properly introduce left realism.
So what exactly is it? Well, left realism comes from a left-wing socialist point of view. That means its main focus is on things like social and economic equality. At its core, it argues that the number one cause of crime isn't individual bad choices, but the deep structural inequality you find in capitalist societies, systems that are all about private ownership and competition.
Okay, let's break down the main ideas here. First off, left realists are really clear about this. Crime is a real and serious problem. It's not some abstract concept, it's something that genuinely devastates communities. Second, they point the finger directly at inequality as the root cause. And that makes sense of what we just talked about, right? It explains why disadvantaged groups are so often the victims and why you see the highest crime rates in the most deprived areas. And so, the ultimate goal here isn't just about locking people up. It's about building a fairer, more equal society to stop crime before it even starts.
Okay, so if inequality is the big root cause, how does that actually play out? Like, what are the specific steps that take a person from feeling unequal to actually committing a crime? Well, left realists have a three-part explanation for this.
So, the theory lays out these three key drivers that kind of feed into each other, like a chain reaction. It all starts with something called relative deprivation. This isn't just about being poor. It's about feeling poor compared to everyone else. You're constantly seeing lifestyles on TV or social media that feel completely out of reach. That sense of unfairness can then lead to step 2, marginalization. This is where people feel totally pushed to the edges of society, like they have no power, no voice, no way to change their situation. And from that feeling of powerlessness, some people might end up forming or joining subcultures, basically groups with their own set of rules and values, where sometimes crime becomes a way to cope, or even to gain respect.
Now, all three of those are super connected, but let's really zoom in on that middle one, marginalization. It's such a crucial part of this whole process because it really gets at how that feeling of being powerless can have some really dangerous consequences.
And you can see the contrast so clearly here. On one hand, you've got groups that are part of the system. They have clear goals, maybe like fighting for better wages. And they have organizations like trade unions to speak for them. They have a voice. But then you have marginalized groups. They often don't have clear organized goals, and there's nobody representing their interests. So they're just left feeling completely powerless and shut out.
And here's where it all comes to a head. All that frustration, that resentment from feeling powerless and voiceless, it has to go somewhere, right? For left realists, this is the tipping point. This is where that desperation can just boil over into crime. And you see it especially in things like violence or rioting, which they would argue are really just raw expressions of that intense feeling of injustice.
Okay, so if those are the causes, what about the solutions? Well, this is where left realism really focuses. It's all about prevention.
The theory basically argues that the answer isn't just more tough on crime policies. That's not going to fix the root problem. Instead, the real solutions have to happen at the community level before the crime even occurs. We're talking about investing in social programs, creating actual opportunities for people, and this is a big one, working to improve the relationship between the police and the communities they serve, which is often really strained. It's about building trust, not just trying to impose control from the outside.
Of course, just like any big theory, left realism has its fans and its critics. So, let's take a fair, balanced look at some of its biggest strengths and weaknesses.
So, on the plus side, a lot of people praise left realism for really taking street crime seriously and putting the focus on the victims. It draws a really powerful line between deprivation and crime. But on the other hand, it definitely has its critics. For one, it has a tough time explaining white-collar crime, stuff like fraud committed by rich people. Some also argue it's maybe too soft on criminals because it focuses so much on the root causes instead of just punishment. And probably the biggest critique is that, hey, not everyone who's deprived turns to crime, right? So the link isn't 100% automatic.
So when you boil it all down,
The causes, the solutions, the pros, the cons. What's the one big takeaway here? I think it's this. Left realism's central argument is a simple but pretty profound idea, that a more equal society would be a safer society, for everyone.
And that really leaves us with a final, pretty big question to think about. If we even just entertain the idea that deep inequality is a major driver of crime, well, what does that mean for our society today? What should our priorities be? It's definitely something to chew on.